যায় আর কি, এবং যেটা হচ্ছে একদম সেভই থাকে আর কি। পিডিএফ ফাইলে আবার কমেন্টটা অ্যাড করা একটু ডিফিকাল্ট, সো আমাকে বেসিক্যালি একটু খাতায় আর কি একটু মানে মার্কিং গুলো করতে হচ্ছে, মানে ওই পিডিএফ ফাইলটাতে না, আমার নোটবুকে আর কি। আচ্ছা, কিছু কিছু মিট তোমরা মানে ধরো এক্সাম এইভাবে দাও না যে কোয়েশ্চেন গুলো গুগল ফর্মে থাকে, মানে তোমরা জাস্ট সাবমিট করার সময় অ্যান্সারটা পেস্ট করতে হয়, এই ধরনের এক্সাম দিতে কি তোমাদের কোনো মানে ডু ইউ ফিল এনি ট্রাবল? আই মিন ইফ দ্য কোয়েশ্চেন ইজ ইন দ্য গুগল ফর্ম।
স্যার গুগল ফর্মে তো একদম শর্ট কোয়েশ্চেনের পরীক্ষা দিছি, মানে হয় এরকম কিছু তো দেই নাই।
বেসিক্যালি অ্যাকচুয়ালি গুগল ইউ ক্যান অলসো রাইট লং অ্যান্সার গুগল ফর্মে, ওই শর্টের
গুগল
বদলে।
ফর্মে প্রবলেম হয় কি যে
হুম।
পরে আবার রিচেক করা যায় না, মানে অনেকবার কার্সার পিছনে নিতে হয়, অনেক ঝামেলা করতে হয়, বারবার হারায় যায়, মিস্টেকস হয়, মানে ওটা ঠিক
আচ্ছা,
মতো খেয়াল রাখা
যেইটা
যায় না আর
শোনো,
কি।
মানে যেইটা করা হতে পারে
জি।
যে ধরো কোয়েশ্চেনটা এখন যেরকম আছে সেরকমই আছে, সেরকমই হচ্ছে কোয়েশ্চেনটা তোমরা আলাদাই পাবা, I mean, you will get the question separately. So you can download the question and you can just write the answer in your using your Microsoft Word. So in that case, you have to do just one additional thing. When like in the Meet, you have submitted that script, I mean the Word file where you have written your question. But if the question are in the Google form, in that case, you have to copy individual answer and paste under individual question in the Google form. মানে এই ধরনের পরীক্ষা তো তোমরা দিচ্ছ মনে হয় কিছু কিছু কোর্সে, মানে কোনো প্রবলেম হচ্ছে তোমাদের যে সাবমিট করতে? একটা ধরো হয়তো বা ওই কপি পেস্ট করতে হয়তো বা ধরো লাগলো আধা ঘন্টায়, লাগলো 30 মিনিটস লাগলো, এই সময়টা তোমাদের কি অনলাইনে থাকতে হবে তখন। এখন যেমন অফলাইনে দিতে পারতেছে অ্যাটলিস্ট, তখন আর কি অ্যাটলিস্ট ওই সময় মানে সাবমিট করার সময় একটু লম্বা সময় থাকতে হবে আর কি অনলাইনে, একটু সময় লাগে।
স্যার ওয়ার্ড ফাইলে দেয়াই তো মনে হয় সুবিধা, কারণ গুগল ফর্মে যেটা দেই সেটা হচ্ছে
হ্যাঁ, হ্যাঁ।
একদমই শর্ট কোয়েশ্চেন দেই, মানে ওয়ান লাইন আনসার এরকম।
ও না, গুগল ফর্মেও চাইলে ইয়া পেস্ট করা যায় আর কি, ওটা কোয়েশ্চেন সেট করার সময় অপশন থাকে যে শর্ট শর্ট কোয়েশ্চেন নাকি লং কোয়েশ্চেন আর কি। আচ্ছা, দেখা যায়।
মানে আমরা ওয়ার্ড ফাইলে টাইপ করে তারপর ওটা পেস্ট করে আবার গুগল ফর্মে পেস্ট করবো আর কি।
হ্যাঁ, ওইটা ওই কাজটা করতে গেলে ওইটা করা লাগবে কি। আচ্ছা, এনিওয়ে মিডের মতোই হয়তো বা নিবো, কারণ তবে মিডে তোমরা যদি ওয়ার্ড ফাইল সাবমিট করো আমার জন্য একটু সুবিধা হয় কি, কারণ ওয়ার্ড ফাইলে তখন আমি এক্স্যাক্টলি কমেন্টটা করতে পারি, পিডিএফ ফাইলে তো আবার কমেন্ট করা যায় না। আচ্ছা, যাই হোক, আমরা একটু পড়াশোনা করি এখন, হ্যাঁ। So my plan is by next class we'll finish the syllabus. Okay. So next in that case, I mean there will be online session, so we can more discuss about the question answer. Okay. তো চলেন আমরা একটু পড়াশোনা করি। Okay, in the last class I discussed until lecture 13, right? আমাদের কি lecture 13 পড়া হয়েছে? Raymond, can you remember? Lecture 13 is done, right?
Lecture 13. Yes, lecture 13.
Was done, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean the first three law of the health principles: contact analysis, identifying the critical control points, and establishing the critical limit. Okay, I'll just recap the lecture 13 briefly, then we'll study lecture 14 in more details. কেউ কি কিছু বলতেছিল নাকি?
না স্যার, আমি বলতেছিলাম যে লেকচার 13 শেষ হয়েছিল।
হ্যাঁ, লেকচার 13 হয়ে গেছে। আচ্ছা, ওকে, জাস্ট একটু তোমাদের রিক্যাপের জন্য আর কি। So in last class we starting HACCP, hazard analysis and critical control point. And in HACCP principles there are basically total 7 principles. I mean a HACCP program. So if we define it as a program, a HACCP program to ensure the quality or to make sure that the industry is producing quality. There are 7 HACCP principles that the program should include, that the food industry should follow. So the first principle was conduct of hazard analysis. I mean, we have to analyze all the hazards, all the probable hazards that can contaminate food. And these hazards include microbiological hazards, physical hazards, chemical hazards. Okay. And then after analyzes the hazards, we need to identify the critical control points. Critical control points means all those steps of the process or all the area of the processing plant from where this hazard can enter into the food. When first we analyze the hazard, then we find the place from where, then we find the place or the procedure from where these hazards can enter into the system. This is the second principle. And the third principle is now we have to set a critical limit for the basically preventive measures that are associated with those identified critical control points. So say for example, we have identified that, say for example, in the milk industry, okay, many milk industry, they pasteurize the food. And pasteurization have to be done in a defined temperature. Say for example, maybe 72 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. Okay, so pasteurization process is a critical control point for the milk industry, right? Because if the pasteurization is not done appropriately, the milk may contain unwanted or spoilage microorganism in it, which will spoil the milk, right? So pasteurization process is a critical control point. So we have to set a limit that say 72 degrees Celsius is the limit for pasteurization. So say 72 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes is required. So a limit is usually set here that okay, the temperature can fluctuate a little bit, like it can go to it can go below to it can be from 70 to 75 degrees Celsius. Okay, and 15 minutes is required, so it can be like 15 minutes to 20 minutes, something like this. Okay, we have to set the limit to prevent the hazard from contaminating the food. Okay, so these were the 3 principles. Now, today we'll start, we'll talk about the other 4 principles, the remaining 4. তোমরা কিন্তু যে কোনো সময় আমাকে কোয়েশ্চেন করতে পারো আর কি, কোনো পয়েন্ট যদি না বুঝো, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। So lecture 14 and lecture 14 contain the principle number 4, 5, 6 and 7. Okay, so we did until principle 3. Then what we need to do? The principle 4 is establish monitoring procedures for critical control points. Okay, basically monitoring procedures means we have to monitor everything. Okay, so in based on this principle, what kind of things are monitored? কোন ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে মনিটর করা হয়? Observations or measurements of critical control point. Verification of critical control point. Okay, verification is a different procedure. Okay, verification is a different procedure. Verification itself is one principle of the HACCP system, but here verification of CP means that actually we also have to monitor the process by which verification is done. Okay, okay, then whether a CCP is under control and detect the loss of control, that means everything have to be monitored. And according to this principle, principle 4, everything have to be monitored. Okay, so we have to monitor the critical control point. We have to also monitor the process by which the critical control points are controlled or prevented. Okay, hazards, but say for example the sanitation. Okay, like the proper sanitation have to be done in the food industry. So the sanitation procedure is not monitoring system. The monitoring system is so that, okay, whether the workers who are responsible for sanitizing the process, whether they are doing that properly or not, according to guideline or not. Okay, monitoring means that things. Sanitization is not a monitoring thing, but okay, it's a process. But monitoring means, okay, we have to monitor whether the sanitization process is done appropriately or according to the guideline. Okay. Okay. So the monitoring serves three main purposes. Okay, so I mean, why the industry need to monitor, do the monitoring things, because it serves three main purposes. First, tracking of the operation. They can track the operation, whether the operation is according to the laws or not. Second, determine when there is a loss of control and deviation. Okay, so as monitoring is going on, so if there is any aberration in the process, যে প্রসেস যেভাবে হওয়ার কথা ছিল সেটা ঠিক মতো হচ্ছে না, সো মনিটর করা হলে ডেফিনেটলি সেটাও কি মানে we can determine that something wrong, something deviated has been occurred. The third, provides written documentation in verification. Okay, so basically whatever people monitor, they have to document everything. Okay, these are like for the record keeping process. Okay. Okay, now in the verification, okay, so I mean the verification process, I mean how we'll do the verification, it also should be written. Okay, and the verification process, it should contain something. What kind of thing? The verification process have to be very detailed, such as who will do the monitoring, it should be clearly mentioned. I mean, who are responsible for the monitoring in the industry, what they should monitor, okay, when they should monitor, and how they should monitor. Every of these things should be clearly and accurately written. Okay, so I mean in the very monitoring program, all of these things should be very clearly and in detail mentioned. Now the verification that we do in the industry, there are different types. Okay, there are different types of there are different types of monitoring processes. Okay, so for example, quantitative measurements. Quantitative measurements means where we calculate the or measure the value, exact value. For example, temperature, time. We measure or determine these things as a quantitative value, right? 37 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Celsius. Okay, quantitative. Okay, so if we monitor, when we monitor temperature, time, pH, water activity, this humidity, okay, in that case, these fall into quantitative measurements monitoring. Okay, then observation. Observation means usually observation type monitoring is done more manually, like say for example manual sorting. Okay, actually in every food industry manual sorting is quite very common. Automated sorting is there, but still manual sorting is necessary. Okay, continuous monitoring. The monitoring will be done continuously. Okay, assurance that all products produced have met the criteria for acceptability. Then discontinuous monitoring. Okay, discontinuous monitoring, you can say discontinuous monitoring is monitoring continuous monitoring. Discontinuous monitoring এই প্রসেসগুলো কন্টিনিউয়াস মনিটরিংটাকে আবার মনিটর করা হয়। So I mean in case of discontinuous monitoring, what it means? A spot checking. Okay, a spot check a system under continuous monitoring to ensure monitoring procedures are operating as designed. That means monitoring the monitoring procedure. Okay, so what is the goal of monitoring procedures? to monitor whether the process are going fine. And discontinuous monitoring is checking this monitoring process, that whether this monitoring process is going fine or not. Okay, এটা মনিটরিং এর উপরে মনিটরিং বলতে পারো আর কি। ওকে, ডিসকন্টিনিউয়াস মনিটরিং দিয়ে মনিটরিং প্রসেসটাকে মনিটরিং করা হয়, যে ওকে যে আমরা যে মনিটরিং প্রসেসটা প্ল্যান করা হয়েছে ইন্ডাস্ট্রির জন্য বা যেটা ডিজাইন করা, যেটাকে যে মনিটরিং প্রসিডিউর এভাবে এভাবে করতে হবে, সেটা ওভাবে করা হচ্ছে কিনা, অ্যাকর্ডিং টু গাইডলাইন করা হচ্ছে কিনা, সেইটা চেক করার কাজ করা হয় ডিসকন্টিনিউয়াস মনিটরিং দিয়ে, স্পট চেক। ওকে, সো discontinuous monitoring, I mean, they are like usually this kind of monitoring is done in a random way. I mean, there is no defined schedule that today I'll do this monitoring and day after tomorrow I'll do another day, and then there is no such defined schedule or a schedule for discontinuous monitoring. Okay, they are just done randomly. It's actually necessary to kind of say, for example, you are responsible to doing discontinuous monitoring and I am responsible for continuous monitoring. Okay, so if I know that tomorrow you are going to do the spot checking, I'll be more careful in tomorrow, right? মানে আমি যখন জানি যে কালকে হচ্ছে তুমি চেক মনিটর করতে আসবা, আমি তো কালকে খুব মানে একদম সাধু সাবধান, হ্যাঁ কালকে আমি খুব ভদ্রলোকের মতো থাকবো, সব প্রসিডিউর ঠিক মতো করবো। ওকে, সো ডিসকন্টিনিউয়াস মনিটরিং কখনো হচ্ছে কিন্তু শিডিউল মেনে করা যায় না। শিডিউল মেনে করলেই সেখানে হচ্ছে ওই কি জানি বলে কনফ্লিক্ট অফ ইন্টারেস্ট চলে আসবে। ওকে, এটা র্যান্ডমলি হতে হবে। So as I mean, this continuous monitoring is done randomly, so the person who do the continuous monitoring always every time to be alert. Okay. Now, who do the monitoring? I mean, the personnel, the workers, like the line supervisors, selected line supervisors, maintenance personnel. Usually, these people in the food industry, they do the monitoring. Okay. Okay, it was principle 4. Now then, principle 5. Okay, so we already said the process for monitoring. Now, establish corrective actions. Okay, so although in the industry it is desired that everything will be done according to the guideline, according to the plan, yet problem can occur. Okay, mistake can happen. So whenever problem occurs or mistake happens, there should be system or procedure to correct the mistakes. Okay, so under principle 5, we establish the corrective actions or measures. Okay. Okay, so what these corrective actions includes? Okay, so if you think the corrective actions as procedure, so what are the elements of this procedure? That means what are the element of the corrective actions? Determine and correct the cause of non-compliance. Non-compliance means the mistake. Okay, মানে একটা জিনিস যেভাবে ঘটার কথা ছিল সেভাবে যদি না ঘটে, তার মানে তো এটা একটা ভুল আর কি। ওকে, নন কমপ্লায়েন্স, কমপ্লাই করতেছে না। ওকে, so if any non-compliance occur, we need to determine why this has, I mean, what is the cause of this non-compliance. Okay, and then we have to correct it. Okay, so it's not good enough that we just correct the non-compliance. We also have to determine the cause, because otherwise the same mistake can occur again. Okay, so just correcting the mistakes is not good enough. We also have to find out the cause of the mistake. Okay, then okay, these are the elements of the corrective action program or procedure. Okay? Okay, then determine the disposition of non-compliant product. Okay, so sometimes, I mean, because of the error or mistake, the non-compliant product can be so much degraded or spoiled that we cannot correct them. Okay, so in that case, we have to determine how we are going to dispose them. Okay, Then record the corrective actions. Everything have to be written. Everything. I mean, say for example, you are responsible for the corrective actions thing. Then you have to, and you find out any non-compliance, so you do the determine. I mean, you determine why it happens. You did the corrective measures. So for correcting it, you did several things. Okay, so everything you do have to be written. Okay, so everything related with the corrective actions have to be recorded or written. Okay. Okay. Now these are the elements that a corrective action procedure should have, and now the properties of a corrective actions. Okay, or you can say the characteristics of a corrective actions. So a corrective action should be specific. Okay, it should be very specific. So I mean, depending on the errors, the corrective actions should be specific. So if this errors occurs, this corrective action should be taken. Okay, clearly written, specific, immediate, and comprehensive. Okay, so it's desirable that the corrective action should be immediately applicable. I mean, if errors occur, then immediately we can apply the corrective actions. Okay, and comprehensive. I mean, the corrective action should be such that they will be able to, I mean, they will address all the things associated with the error. Okay, documented. Everything have to be documented. Okay, now corrective action procedures. It means, I mean, applying the corrective action procedure is not a one-step process. Okay, so there are stepwise works that we do when we apply a corrective action. Okay, so we can say there are a step of work or action to apply the corrective actions measures. Okay, so what are those steps of corrective action procedures? Okay, there are actually several steps like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These steps are in general. Okay, so be depending on the food plant and the procedures they use, the step of the corrective actions procedures can be, I mean, different. Okay, because sometimes there can be 9 steps, sometimes there can be 6 steps, but these 7 steps, these are the basic steps. Okay, so step 1, if a error occur, we need to stop the line or process and segregate affected product. ভুল হলো, সাথে সাথে তুমি তোমার প্রসেসিং লাইনটা স্টপ করো, করে হচ্ছে যে প্রোডাক্টগুলো অ্যাফেক্টেড সেগুলোকে হচ্ছে আলাদা করে ফেলতে হবে। হ্যাঁ, অ্যাফেক্টেড প্রোডাক্টকে আনঅ্যাফেক্টেড প্রোডাক্টের সাথে রাখা যাবে না। তাহলে I mean, in that case, if we do that, the affected product, it can contaminate the unaffected product. Okay, so we have to separate the affected product immediately. Yeah. Okay, then step 2, adjust process to bring the CCP back under control and correct the cause of the deviation. Okay, so if we can find out the error, just 1 second. হ্যাঁ, এটা কুইজ চলতেছে তো একটা স্টুডেন্ট ফোন দিছে। হ্যাঁ, I'm just coming back, 1 second. Sorry, I'm back. ফার্স্ট সেমিস্টারের স্টুডেন্টদের কুইজ হচ্ছে, একটু একটু বিপদে আছি। আচ্ছা, এমনিতে তো তোমরা খুবই হচ্ছে মানে মানে এই টেকনোলজিক্যাল ব্যাপারে আমার থেকে ডেফিনেটলি স্মার্টার। এই কুইজ আর মিড দেওয়ার সময় খালি প্রবলেম গুলো অ্যারাইজ করে। হ্যাঁ
স্যার ফার্স্ট সেমিস্টারের স্টুডেন্ট মানে এই সেমিস্টারে কি স্টুডেন্ট নেওয়া হয়েছে?
হ্যাঁ, কি বলবো, এই সেমিস্টারে না হয়েছে, এই যে নতুন সেমিস্টার আসছে, অনেক স্টুডেন্ট ভর্তি হয়েছে তো।
মানে ওরা ইউনিভার্সিটি দেখে নাই কিন্তু এখন ক্লাস করতেছে।
না, ব্র্যাক ইউনিভার্সিটির কিন্তু পারফরমেন্স খুব ভালো। তোমার হচ্ছে ওই ইয়ার ক্ষেত্রে মানে অনেক স্টুডেন্ট ভর্তি হচ্ছে আর কি, মানে বিয়ন্ড আওয়ার এক্সপেকটেশন। আমরা যতখানি এক্সপেক্ট করছি লাস্ট সেমিস্টারে তার থেকে বেশি স্টুডেন্ট ভর্তি হয়েছে, এবারও এই আপকামিং সেমিস্টারে ভর্তি হয়েছে আর কি।
জি স্যার, এখন তো অনেক স্টুডেন্ট ভর্তি হয়। আমাদের সময় তো আমরা একটা সেমিস্টারে 10 জন 12 জন এরকম স্টুডেন্ট ছিল।
হ্যাঁ, মানে ইভেন এই সময়ও আমাদের লাস্ট সেমিস্টারে শুধু মাইক্রোবায়োলজি প্রোগ্রামে 20 জন ভর্তি হয়েছে। আপকামিং সেমিস্টারে এখন পর্যন্ত 20 জন। ইন্টার পরীক্ষা হয়নি তারপরেও আর কি। ওকে, ইটস গুড ফর আস, রাইট? আচ্ছা, যাই হোক, আমরা আবার একটু পড়াশোনা শুরু করি না? হ্যাঁ, ওকে। সো স্টেপ 1, দেন স্টেপ 2, adjust process to bring the CCP back under control and correct the cause of the deviation. I mean, as error occurs, that means definitely there were some problem in the CCP. There were some deviation. Deviation মানে কি? স্ট্যান্ডার্ড থেকে সরে যাওয়া আর কি, মানে যেটা থাকার কথা সিসিপি সেই অবস্থায় নাই আর কি। ওকে, সো ইন দ্যাট কেস, first we stopped the line of process and segregated the affected product. Then we will try to bring the CCP back under control. Okay, so that means we will correct the CCP, and also we have to correct the cause of the deviation. Okay, cause of the error. Then document and record the actions taken. Okay, whatever we did here, everything have to be recorded. Then step 4, consult with the HACCP team, HACCP team, and any others deemed appropriate. Okay, so basically these are written in the guidelines. So if any errors occurs and we do the corrective measures, with whom we need to consult. Okay, these are basically mentioned in the guideline. Okay, okay, then step 5, inform regulatory officials if appropriate. Okay, so again it's again depend on the regulatory authorities. So for example, in case of USDA, it is required that if anything occurs in the factory, they need to inform it to the USDA. Okay, it's the USDA requirement. Okay, so I'm not sure whether BSTI, I mean our regulatory organization, they have this kind of regulatory requirement or not. Okay, but maybe ISO, they have this kind of requirement. Okay, so I mean if your factory is ISO certified, then if any errors occurs and I do the corrective measures, so you have to inform everything what you did to the ISO authority. Okay, then step 6, follow product disposition plan and conduct a product disposition analysis. Okay, so you have to plan. I mean, if you have to dispose the affected product, then you need to I mean plan how you are going to dispose the product. Okay, then step 7, determine whether modification of the HACCP plan is necessary or not. Okay, so it depends on the error. I mean, if we see that after, I mean, the correcting the error, okay, I mean, the existing plan is working. I mean, the existing HACCP plan is working. So it was just a deviation. So in that case, we don't need to change the HACCP plan. But sometimes the errors may be like that. The HACCP plan have to be changed. Okay. Say for example, I mean, in the food industry, they use certain preventive measures to prevent the microbiological contamination. Okay, they use certain procedures. But it may happen that your raw materials may suddenly, I mean, it begin to contain new kinds of microbes. It can happen, right? And you saw that the existing preventive measures is not good enough to eliminate that new contamination. In that case, we have to rethink about our hazard plan. Okay, মানে এরকম হতে পারে হ্যাঁ যে নতুন একটা হ্যাজার্ড হঠাৎ করে চলে আসলো যেটা হচ্ছে এক্সিস্টিং প্ল্যান দিয়ে প্রিভেন্ট করা সম্ভব না, অথবা দেখা গেল একটা নতুন মাইক্রোবস আসছে যেটা হচ্ছে মোর রেজিস্ট্যান্ট, অথবা ধরো হঠাৎ করে র ম্যাটেরিয়ালে যে পরিমাণ মাইক্রোবায়োলজিক্যাল লোড থাকার কথা লোড তার থেকে বেশি আছে। সো ফর এক্সাম্পল দ্য র ম্যাটেরিয়ালস may contain more microbes as usual. Okay, so in that case we have to change the HACCP plan. Okay. Okay, this was principle 5, then principle 6. Establish verification procedures. Well, you all know about verification, right? What verification and what validation is. So under principle 6, we have to establish the procedures by which we will do the verification. Okay, so what verification is, you already know, yet I'll just reiterate. So verification means those activities other than monitoring. Okay, monitoring chhara activities exactly. Yeah? These are not monitoring activities. So verifications are those activities other than monitoring that determine the validity of the HACCP plan and that the system is operating according to the plan. Okay. Okay, so to clearly understand the verification, we should also understand validation. Usually in the industry, these two words, verification and validation, are quite often confused. প্রায় হচ্ছে এই দুটার মধ্যে আমরা প্যাচ লাগাই ফেলি আর কি, ভেরিফিকেশন ও ভ্যালিডেশনের মধ্যে। ওকে, so validation means that element of verification focused on collecting and evaluating scientific and technical information to determine if the HACCP plan, when properly implemented, will effectively control the hazard. Okay, so think about any procedure of the food industry. Okay, let's think about the pasteurization process of milk, a very common example. So in pasteurization process, it is mentioned that at this temperature for this amount of time the milk need to be treated. So for example, okay, it can vary, okay, it can be 72 or even 80 degrees Celsius, but however, say like say it is written that for pasteurization we have to treat the milk at 72 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. Okay, so this is the process of pasteurization. Now validation means scientifically we have to prove that these mentioned parameters are good enough to decrease the number of microbes as intended. I mean, if we treat the milk for 72 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, this is good enough to lower the spoilage bacteria in the milk. This is validation. ভ্যালিডেশন মানে হচ্ছে আমার যে প্রসেসটা বলা হচ্ছে সেটা সায়েন্টিফিক্যালি আমাকে প্রুফ করতে হবে যে হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, আমি 72 ঘন্টা 72 ডিগ্রি সেলসিয়াসে 30 মিনিট দিয়ে ধরে যদি দুধকে ট্রিট করি তাহলে স্পয়েলেজ যে ব্যাকটেরিয়া বা অর্গানিজম থাকে সেগুলোর নাম্বার কমে যাবে। কি পরিমাণ কমবে, যেটা হচ্ছে ইন্টেন্ডেড, যে এর নিচে থাকলে দুধ স্পয়েল হবে না। ওকে, সো দিস ইজ ভ্যালিডেশন। সো হোয়াট ইজ ভেরিফিকেশন? ভেরিফিকেশন মিনস that the pasteurization plant is going under the following the defined parameters. Okay, so the pasteurization is done at 72 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. This is verification. Okay, I mean it is in the guideline, is it written that pasteurization have to be done following these conditions. So verification means to verify, okay, the pasteurization is indeed going on following those guideline and under those condition. ঠিক আছে, ভেরিফিকেশন হচ্ছে ভেরিফাই করা যে ওকে ঠিক আছে যেভাবে বলা হয়েছে সেভাবে করা হচ্ছে। ঠিক আছে, so you can say that verification is kind of a continuous process. I mean we have to do this the verification continuously. Okay, But validation is not a continuous process. Okay, validation is usually for different processes. There are defined, there are a scheduled plan that when validation need to be done. Okay. Okay, I think we have you are clear about the verification and validation, right? Okay, so in principle 6, we have to establish the verification procedure. I mean, how we'll do the verification. Okay. And here, so the verification should focus on confirming that. I mean, why the verification is necessary to do, to confirm that the product description and flow diagram are accurate. Okay, so every procedures are conducting accurately, following the guideline. Critical control points are monitored as required by the HACCP plan. Okay, processes are operating within established critical limits. Records are completed accurately at the time intervals required and reviewed appropriately. Consumer complaints are reviewed and appropriate action taken. Okay, so to ensure this, to confirm this, the verification is required. Okay, there are also other points like monitoring activities have been performed at the locations specified in the HACCP plan. Monitoring activities have been performed at the frequencies specified in the HACCP plan. Okay, so also, I mean, not only the process, also the monitoring process or activities also need to be verified. Okay, তো বলা হয়েছে যে মনিটর করতে হবে যে সকালে একবার, দুপুরে একবার, রাতে একবার। এটাও ভেরিফাই করতে হবে যে হ্যাঁ, সকালে, দুপুরে, রাতে মানে মনিটর করা হচ্ছে। Okay, corrective actions have been performed whenever monitoring indicated deviated from critical limits, and equipment has been calibrated at the frequencies specified in the HACCP plan. Okay, so basically everything, every process done in a food industry need to be verified. That every process they are going or conducting according to the defined guideline. Okay. So okay, so it almost sounds like monitoring, but this process are not same. Okay, we have to monitor everything. Also, we have to verify everything. Okay. Okay, so now, I mean, these are the things. I mean, we need to verify to confirm these things. Okay. Now, basically, I mean, what kind of works fall under the verification processes? This kind of works: verification of prerequisite programs, verification of CCPs, verification of HACCP plan. I mean, we do different verifications in an industry. Okay, so if we want to categorize those verification procedure or work, maybe we can categorize them into these 3 categories. Okay, category: verification of prerequisite programs, verification of CCPs, and verification of HACCP plan. Okay, so about the prerequisite program, if you Google it, what is prerequisite programs in the food industry, you will easily get many information. So this information basically I have just copied it from the net. Okay, if you just search prerequisite programs in food industry, you will easily get what prerequisite programs mean. Okay, prerequisite programs means, say for example, it is written that when we process the food, the temperature of the room have to be 25 degrees Celsius. Okay, for some food it can be like 10 degrees Celsius. For some food the temperature requirement can be 45 degrees Celsius. Okay, so prerequisite program means to ensure that all the conditions which are mentioned, I mean, all the required conditions were established when the process was done. Okay, say for example, sanitization program. Okay, for some sanitization process it is required that the warm water need to be used. So it's also a prerequisite programs that warm water have to be used for this sanitization. Okay, anyway, so these are the category of verification process. Okay, so now we'll talk about little bit details about this. different verification process. Okay, so first verification of CCPs. Basically, what we do: calibration, records review, independent check. Okay, so calibration means calibrating like all the instruments. So, for example, HACCP plans rely on accurate measurements. Okay, the measurement must have to be accurate. Okay, so for example, temperature, pressure, pH, flow rate, water activity. So, to measure these different things, we use instrument, right? For temperature, we use thermometer. For pH, we use pH meter. So, this meter need to be calibrated. Okay, so when we do calibration, we can understand whether the machine is okay or not. ক্যালিব্রেশন করে আমরা এই জিনিসটাই দেখি আর কি, যে ঠিক আছে আমার মেশিন ঠিক আছে কিনা। ওকে ওকে দেন specify instruments or equipment and the calibration frequency and individual responsible in the plan. Okay, so basically in verification of CCP, not only we do the calibration, or that means accurate measurements, also who will do the calibration, how the calibration will be done, and when we have to do the calibration. Everything should be specified or clearly mentioned. Okay, and records for calibration activities. Everything have to be recorded. Everything. I mean, when you did the calibration, how you did the calibration, even the result of your calibration. Okay, you have to record everything. Okay, verification of CCP calibration, independent check. Okay, we are still in the verification of CCPs. Okay, calibration, records review. Already records review means actually everything have to be recorded and reviewed, then independent check. Okay, so independent checks provide a second level of assurance that the CCP is providing adequate control of the hazard, and or that the hazard is being controlled as intended. Okay, so basically it's like the validation procedure. Okay, so what we do validation in validation, we ensure that the procedure that we use are good enough to control the CCP. Okay, independent check, actually the way by which independent check is done, it will be the same like the way validation is done, but the thing is they need to be done uh, independently. I mean, usually this kind of things, okay, independent check is done by the auditor. Okay, so there are defined people who will do the validation, but this independent check, these are done by the auditor. And in the industry, we know that there are two types of audits: internal audits, external audits. Okay, so basically all the industry, both the pharmaceutical and the food industry, they have to do these kind of things both by internal auditor and also external auditor. Okay, and here auditing don't just mean that they do the check the documents. Basically they have to do the test. The internal auditors, they also do the test. External auditors, they also do the same test, and then the test result of are compared. Okay, okay, we are done with the verification of CCP. Then HACCP plan verification, this one. Okay? HACCP plan verification. Okay, the HACCP plan, I mean the HACCP plan itself need to be verified. So, and it's usually conducted periodically. Okay, it is defined. I mean, in what frequency the plan need to be verified. Okay, so what basically are done: record review and on-site audit. Okay, on-site audit is done both by internal auditor and also external auditor. Okay. Okay, then okay, principle 7, establishing record keeping procedures. well, record keeping procedures. Okay, so I mean, we know that everything have to be recorded, but in the HACCP, it also should be, I mean, planned how we are going to keep the record. Okay, so also the record keeping procedures have to be clearly mentioned, that where and how we'll store the record. Okay, and there are actually requirement that for say uh, these are actually written in the guideline, that for how long the record have to be stored and in what format. So I mean, it can be required that you have to store your record both in printed form and also in soft form, like in the computer hard drives or in the cloud storage. Okay, and you have to store the record for like 5 years, 2 years, okay, 1 years. It depends on the product actually, for how long you have to store the record. Okay, so it's the principle 7, establishing record keeping procedures. Okay, so HACCP records. So basically, what is the benefit, or why we need to, why it is necessary to keep the record, to provide evidence that HACCP plan is being followed. And records are a means of tracing the history of ingredients or products. They provide a mechanism to learn of potential problems, because everything is written there. Every information about the errors and the corrective actions, everything are written in the records. Okay. Focus on food safety. Okay, now types of HACCP records. Okay, so basically we know everything's have to be recorded. So if we want to categorize these records, so they basically belong to 4 categories. Okay, so first, summary of the hazard analysis. These are the types of the records. Okay, so summary of the hazard analysis, the HACCP plan, support documentation, daily operational records. Okay. Okay. So the support documentation, basically, especially the HACCP plan, they include many support documentation. Because in the main HACCP plan, say for example, in the HACCP plan, the sanitation procedure is written that by this way, during sanitation of this area, they have to use this kind of sanitizers. They have to apply the sanitizers by this way. Okay. So in the main HACCP plan, it will be maybe written like this way, but it's required that very details, like say for example, how the sanitizers, the mechanism of action of sanitizers, those kind of documents also need to be stored. Okay, and those are stored at support documents. So if we add or include too much information in the main plan, it will be difficult to follow by the workers, right? But it is essential that the support documents are also stored. Okay, now we'll just try to learn more details about these different types of records. First, summary of the hazard analysis. Okay, so document the deliberations of the HACCP team. Okay, so how deliberately the HACCP team workers work, supports the decision on the hazards that are controlled in the HACCP plan. Okay, include justification or discussion of the control measures, like the corrective actions selected to prevent, eliminate, or reduce. And these documents can be in table form. Okay, well, you can write it in a list form, or you can write it in a table form. Usually there are standard formats how we write this information. Okay, we can write in a table format or in a list format. Okay, there are actually standard formats, file formats. Okay, so summary of the hazards analysis. Now the HACCP plan. Okay, so what is HACCP plan? You already know, right? A list of HACCP team and assigned responsibilities. Okay, so basically who were responsible for the doing the HACCP things. Okay, so I mean, basically, like who are responsible for which work. Okay, this need to be clearly mentioned. Okay, and the description of the food is distribution process, intended use, information about the consumer, a verified flow diagram for the entire manufacturing process with CCPs indicated যে কোন প্রসেসে কোন কোন জায়গাগুলো হচ্ছে ক্রিটিক্যাল কন্ট্রোল পয়েন্ট ওকে a HACCP plan summary table. So all these informations they are included in the HACCP plan records. Okay, then support document, establishment of critical control points, process flow with CCPs could include a record of the decision tree. Okay, if you can remember about the decision tree, it was included in lecture 30. Establishment of critical limits, establishment of monitoring procedures. I mean, how these things were done. Everything have to be recorded. Okay, but these things are recorded as support document because, like, for example, how a critical control point need to be prevented. Okay, say for example, proper cleaning, or say for example, a critical control point need to be heated with means like, say for example, a জলীয় বাষ্প ইংলিশ জানি কি what you say that
vapor na sir?
Steam,
steam
vapor বা steam.
vapor by steam. Okay, thank you. So for example, a critical control point need to be vapor or steam sterilized. Okay, it has to be written in the main HACCP plan, so the workers so the workers can easily do that. Okay, they will just see that procedure. Okay, so he know that he have to treat this place with steam for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, say. Okay, but the details, I mean, why that point is a critical control points, okay, how they establish it as a critical control point. So, I mean, what kind of organisms can be presented there. These details is not necessary to be in that guide, in that procedure, right? In that SOP. But these information are important. So these information are recorded as support documents. Okay. Okay, then the third one. Sorry, not the third one. The fourth one, daily operation records. Okay. So daily operation records include monitoring records, corrective action records, verification records, this kind of things. Okay. And finally, the benefits of good record keeping. Okay, these are very easy things. If you just read it out, you will easily understand. Like help to work more efficiently. Okay, so enable to meet legal obligations applicable to work. Okay, there are legal obligations that record have to be kept and stored. Okay, protect rights as an employee and citizen. Enable review of processes and decisions. Okay, this is actually, record keeping is very important in the industry. Otherwise, you can be in the trap. Say, for example, errors occur. Say you are the responsible person for correcting a process. So an error occurs and you have corrected it. If you don't keep the proper record during the audit, you cannot answer, right? এরকম হতে পারে, হ্যাঁ, ওই ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে হচ্ছে, ইন্ডাস্ট্রি ইজ এ কমপ্লেক্স প্লেস, সো সবকিছু এখানে রেকর্ড রাখতে হয় আর কি। হ্যাঁ, জাস্ট ওরালি না, প্রফেশনাল ফিল্ডে ওরালি এই জিনিসগুলো এনাফ না। ওকে, এটা ফুড ইন্ডাস্ট্রি, একটা এরর হয়েছে আর কি, তুমি হচ্ছে ঠিক করে ফেললা, কোনো রেকর্ড রাখো নেই, মুখে বললে তো আসলে হবে না। Right? So for example, the government authority, they asked that we heard that this kind of problem occurs in your industry, so what you did to correct it. So you have to show them through written documents. Okay. Okay, anyway, so these are the benefits if we keep record accordingly. Okay. Okay, we are done with lecture 4. Anyone have any question? Boring things, right? But trust me, these are the things you will do every day if you work in that. I mean, QC department. It can be pharmaceutical or food. These are the things you have to do every day. And when you are just like say a fresh recruit or junior executive, maybe you will do the test, microbiological test. I mean, if you work as a microbiologist in the industry, when you are just a junior executive, then you will do the microbiological test. But when you, after getting promoted and you become the boss, you will never actually do anything in the lab. And the whole day you have to deal with this kind of things. Papers, papers, and papers. No more test, only papers. এটার কোনো কোয়েশ্চেন আছে নাকি?
না স্যার।
ওকে, এগুলো অবশ্য সহজ জিনিস।
স্যার এই কোর্সটাতে তো মানে বুঝারও তেমন কিছু নাই, আবার শিখারও তেমন কিছু নাই, খালি প্রসেস আর ইয়েগুলো নিয়েই কথা বলে।
হ্যাঁ, এটা ঠিক আর কি। মানে একটু এই কোর্স থেকে একটু আইডিয়া করা যে ঠিক আছে অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমরা কি করি ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে। কারণ যখন তোমরা রিয়েলি ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে যাবা দেখবা যে আরো অনেক নতুন প্রসিডিউর, যে হয়তো বা যেগুলো এখানে বলা হয়েছে এতে দেখবো অনেক ডিফারেন্ট প্রসিডিউর এখানে অ্যাপ্লাই করা হচ্ছে। ওকে, যে এটা জাস্ট হচ্ছে একটা ওভারঅল আইডিয়া যে
হ্যাঁ, আমরা মেমোরাইজ
ওভারঅল বেসিক্যালি কি করা হয়।
এগুলা দিয়ে যে কাজ হবে সবসময় তা তো না, মেমোরাইজ এই জন্য
না,
করে খুব একটা লাভ।
এগুলো দিয়ে কাজ হবে না, কারণ হচ্ছে এই যে হ্যাসাপ প্ল্যান, যেটা হ্যাসাপ প্ল্যান কিন্তু তোমার ইন্ডাস্ট্রি অনুযায়ী ডিফারেন্ট হবে। ধরো এই 7টা প্রিন্সিপাল ঠিক থাকবে, কিন্তু হচ্ছে এক এক ফ্যাক্টরিতে এক এক ধরনের র ম্যাটেরিয়াল ইউজ করে, এক এক ফ্যাক্টরি এক এক ধরনের প্রসেস ইউজ করে, এক এক ধরনের প্রোডাক্ট বানায় আর কি। সো এই ডিটেল হ্যাসাপ প্ল্যানও এক একটার জন্য এক এক রকম হবে, এবং সব কিছুর জন্য কিন্তু রেগুলেশনও এক না, রাইট? এক এক ফুডের জন্য রেগুলেশনও আলাদা।
জি।
Okay. So we have only one more lecture left. Okay, not one. We have basically 2 more lecture left, but those 2 lectures are similar. Basically, on that lecture, the next lecture we'll discuss about the microbiological tests that are done in the QC department, usually done. So we'll finish our syllabus by next class. And for your information, the video lecture is not yet in the in the box. So please, until I upload those, use this classroom lecture as the supportive lecture. Okay.
মানে এর